Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host, Mark Philpott, and today I have another great guest lined up for you. Imagine being able to travel the world every day and seek out new and exciting places and get paid to do it. Well, my guest today is the creator of a travel site called Pip and the City. She's been slaying travel since 2002. She's also a dreamer and an adventurer. It's a warm welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show to Portia Jones. So Pip, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm really excited because Wales just won against France, so I'm super happy right now. I've actually managed to calm down enough to sit down to talk to you.
Now, didn't I time that well? I decided to have a Welsh person on my show seconds after the final whistle of the Rugby World Cup. That worked out pretty well.
That is beautiful serendipity there.
It was good that you ended up beating 14 French players as well. That would have been a bit nasty if it had gone the other way, wouldn't it?
I know. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, please win. Otherwise, I'm going to be on the podcast like, oh, hello.
Especially talking to a New Zealander as well.
Exactly.
That would have been even worse. Yes. So tell us, whereabouts are you in the world today chatting to us from?
So I'm actually home right now, which is rare for me because I spend a lot of time on the road. I've just got back from the Forest of Dean, which is a beautiful part of England where I was doing some work, doing some photography there. I'm home for the weekend, watching the rugby with my husband, and we're off to Carmarthen tomorrow on another trip, which is a gorgeous part of West Wales. So I'm really excited to explore that area and see all that it's got to offer. I'm hoping the weather will be kind to us because, you know, in Wales, the weather can be a little bit dicey. You've probably heard.
I've not only heard, I've experienced it plenty of times.
Then you understand.
Now, look, what I like to do with my guests is I like to give you the opportunity to dedicate your podcast show to someone special in your life. So who would you like to dedicate this show to today?
Oh, definitely my lovely husband, Luke, who is wonderfully supportive in every way in the work that I do, and even down to making me coffee whilst I shout at the TV when the game's on. He's not a rugby fan, you see, so he's not really sure what's going on. But yeah, he tolerates me screaming instructions at Warren Gatland because I can't let the man just do his job.
So you're telling me there's a Welshman that doesn't watch rugby?
Yeah. We've got a funny kind of role reversal there. He's kind of making me coffee and breakfast, bless him, whilst I shout at the sport.
Okay, well, Luke, this episode is for you, and all I can say is go and get Pip another cup of coffee, I guess. Yeah. Pip, we're going to talk about travel, eating, writing, and repeating, and a ton of other stuff today, so I'm really excited about this. First of all, let's start off with traveling. It's such a great thing. So I'd like to know, when was your first overseas travel experience? How old were you, and where did you go to?
The first trip sort of by myself was when I was 18 and I decided to take myself to Paris because Paris is always a good idea, right? And yeah, I just, this was way before, TripAdvisor, Skyscanner, smartphones. So I was kind of, going by myself without a clue, really. I mean, traveling's so easy now, isn't it? You can book in to hotels in advance. You can, do Google Street Maps so you can actually see where you're going before you go. There was none of that when I started travelling. There was no way to keep in touch back at home, really. A lot of my earlier trips, I used to have to buy phone cards and scratch off the back and ring my parents. I'd always forget the time difference as well, so I'd always end up calling home at like 3 a.m. like, hello! So I started travelling from quite a young age, really. That's all I ever really wanted to do, was to see the world. That was my goal, and I've strived from then until now to try and make that happen.
Was there anything that inspired that desire to travel at such a young age? Were there friends of yours that had been traveling, or had you been reading books and magazines and seeing things on the internet? What was it that inspired it?
Well, when I was a child, I was actually a huge fan of Pippi Longstockings, hence my
Ah,
hence my nickname. Because my actual name's Portia, but I've been known as Pip since I was about 4. And I love Pippi
mm,
Longstockings because she went off on adventures and did all these fun things, and I was like, I want to do that. I also wanted hair
mm.
that defied gravity. Do you remember she had those pigtails that stuck up?
Yeah,
And I used to beg my
absolutely.
older sister to plait my hair the same way and get very upset when my sister was unable to defy gravity for me. So,
Mm, mm,
so yeah,
mm.
ever since I was a child, I was just fascinated with other countries and seeing other places. And that's like I said, that's all I ever really wanted to do. That was always my ambition, to try and see as many places as possible.
Yeah, fantastic. Were your parents a little bit nervous with you taking off to Paris by yourself for the first time?
Absolutely. And
Mm.
I was actually meeting a friend over there as well, my friend Greg, who I'd actually met a few years previous at a French summer camp that my parents,
Mm,
like, I went on a family holiday.
mm.
And yeah, so I think they still get nervous now when rocking around everywhere. But ultimately, they've been really supportive and everything. But like any parents, they do worry. Although, as I said, it's easier now because there's so many ways to stay in touch. Whereas on previous trips, my parents would sometimes go weeks without hearing from me or really knowing exactly where I was.
Mm, mm. So, with that trip to Paris, had you done a lot of research about Paris before you left and kind of knew where you were going to go and what you were going to see and do?
No. In fact, I turned up in pretty much like jeans, top, and a jacket, and it was -10 and
Oh,
snowing. I still
mm,
got the photos now, and I
mm,
was just completely inappropriately dressed. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't speak a word of French.
mm,
Yeah, I I like to think I've come a long way since then, but I sort of had a delightfully chaotic way of traveling that I suppose I still have to some extent. Like, I'm kind of clumsy and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I try and be a bit more organized now, especially as I advise other people how to travel. But mostly my advice is don't travel like me. I'll make all the mistakes for you.
we're going to get into that whole notion of mishaps a little bit later on because I've got some questions around that for you. But I'm interested to know, did that trip to Paris spark off an addiction that you wanted to see the rest of the world?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm,
that's. I just wanted more and more and more, and I love the feeling of kind of not of getting lost and not really knowing, where what I was doing or what was going to happen next. I liked the sort of ambiguity of the situation. I'm not a huge fan of structure and plans, and I love that feeling of freedom that comes with
mm,
travel. So you're in another country, and your day and your time is your own, really, to
mm,
to do as you
mm.
please and to kind of make your own adventures. And I think for me, that's my favorite part about travel, is the freedom. Of course, I love seeing places and meeting people, but I think most of all, I just love being the master of my own destiny.
We're going to talk a lot about your online presence today, but I wanted to find out about your early days in terms of how you were as far as extroverted or interacting with the people that you were meeting while you travel. So that trip to Paris, did you spend a lot of time meeting new people, talking to different people from all over the world?
Yeah, so I met my friend Greg, and
Hmm.
he'd worked in France previously, so he knew some locals, he knew other British people. So I ended up actually meeting lots of different people, sort of sitting around in French cafes, having a wine, and feeling sort of incredibly grown up. Because I
Mm.
was only just 18, and it was all
Right.
just like terribly exciting.
Yeah.
And I think that was a lovely sort of like feeling, and meeting, different people from different walks of life and talking to locals as well. And I'd not really had that before.
Mm,
Most of our family holidays are taken in the UK, so you only ever meet people who are kind of the same as you.
mm, mm.
Not that I'm complaining, I love my UK holidays, but
Yeah.
this just kind of opened up a whole new world, really.
Mm. So when you got home from that trip, was there already planning going on for the next adventure?
Yeah, it was just more about trying to get money together. I've always paid for my own travels, so it's always been a
Mm.
case of sort of working hard, saving up, going on the next trip, and repeating that process over the years. So, but I think that's kind of good to have that kind of responsibility for your own travel as well. I think it makes you appreciate it more.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long was it before you took off again after that first trip?
I'm trying to remember now. I went to Dublin. I remember
Hmm.
not too long after that. I then ended up working in Cornwall as well,
Hmm.
teaching outdoor education. I went to do Camp America as well. Went interrailing around Europe. So yeah, I've just been travelling on and off ever since that sort of day, really.
Fantastic. When did you start to get the idea of putting all this together in a on an online presence? Was that sometime around then, or did that come a little bit later on?
That came years later.
Years later. Mm,
When I met my husband, actually,
mm,
I had come back from working in Australia, and I was
mm.
home for the summer because I think I had about 6 weddings to go to
Oh.
that summer. Yeah, and I met my husband, decided to stay because initially my plan was to either go back and do another season in Australia or go and work in New Zealand. But I met
Yep.
Luke, decided to stay, and was all of a sudden like, what am I going to do?
Ah, men
I
change the course
know,
of life for you. Mm.
I know, right? Could I be any more of a cliche? And I got a job at a local college doing events and digital marketing, and I just set up a website on the side talking about my travels, and it just kind of went from there. Really, it just kind of snowballed, and I didn't really expect anything to happen. I just did it for a creative outlet, really.
Mm. So it was more of a hobby than really setting out to make it into a business venture.
Yeah, and I went freelance now about 2 years ago.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I didn't really set out for it to be anything other than an outlet for me.
Now tell us the name of it because I want to discuss this for you with you for the next 1 hour because it's one of my favorite TV shows.
Oh,
So I will confess online that I was a serial binge watcher of this particular program. So what's the name of your site and when did you decide to actually call it that? Was it an easy name for you to choose?
well, my website is called Pip and the City.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because obviously my nickname's Pip. And I was just kind of playing around with ideas. And ironically, Sex and the City is my husband's favourite shows, or one of his favourite shows. Weirdly
Okay.
enough, not mine.
Right.
Which
Oh,
is very
okay.
strange.
So
So,
it's not one of your
yeah,
favourite shows.
I know.
Oh,
Everyone's like, oh, so you're a big fan. I'm like, not really, just like the
right.
name. I know, I'm so strange, but I love the idea of sort of being sat in a New York apartment, tapping away on a computer there, writing stories. Like that part really appeals to me, but the shopping and everything else just goes way over my head because
Right.
I'm just not into to shopping at all. I treat shopping like a sort of like military operation. It's like get out as quickly as possible.
Well, you're one of a kind by the sound of it. Now, it's interesting because there's quite a philosophical side to that character of Jessica, Sarah Jessica Parker, who, as we all know, sits in front of her laptop in her bedroom and types out all these things. Is that kind of an inspirational thing for you from a writing perspective? Have you always been a writer, somebody that's loved writing?
Oh yeah, I've loved writing for ever since I was little, and I like telling sort of stories and taking photos as well. Although I look back at photos I took years ago before I got a proper camera and started learning how to take photos, and I'm like, oh dear,
Mm,
not very
mm.
good. But yeah, I love the romanticism of the writing lifestyle. Although, as many writers will tell you, it's not. Reality doesn't always quite match up to the fantasy. And I'm thinking about sitting in a New York apartment, not in a sort of rainy house in Wales. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh
I
dear.
totally get it. You've got to have a wild imagination to be able to put something together, I guess, at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, how did you start in terms of you said you were doing it while you were at work to start off with? In terms of getting ideas, were you checking out other travel bloggers' sites and getting ideas, or did you just kind of pave your own way with what you wanted to do?
I didn't really look at anyone else's site just because like I said, my intention wasn't to turn it into a thing. It was just for
Mm,
me.
mm,
So I was just kind of rambling on, really. And it was only when, later on down the line where I was like, oh, perhaps this could be a thing, I started structuring it a bit more and being a bit more professional about it rather than sort of long rambling posts about
mm.
things. And what I try and do now is write with me in mind, as in, if I'm looking to go to a destination, I want really informative articles on where to go, what to do, what to see, what to eat. So I try and write with that in mind.
Yeah.
I try and, if I'm creating a guide or an article on a destination, I try and provide as much helpful information as possible, that's hopefully helpful to people, because that's what I'm looking for when I'm researching trips. So I've now become a lot more structured and thoughtful in how I go about writing articles and how to give the best possible information. Whereas
Mm,
I'm
mm.
sure all other travel writers are the same as me. Initially, you just start out sort of rambling, long-winded. Oh, and then I felt this, and what a glorious sunset, blah blah blah. So now I'm trying to go
Yeah.
down a bit more of the informative angle, to really just to kind of try and help people
Yeah.
with their trip planning. And try and inspire people to go to destinations, especially the more alternative ones as well, that perhaps you might not think about. I love
Mm,
writing about those destinations the best,
mm.
because
Yeah.
I think, sometimes some of these lesser known cities and towns and villages need a little, they need a little love. They need a little light shone on them.
Yeah. Understandable. As far as was there an epiphany that came that day when you decided, hang on, I could actually do this full time and make something of it? Can you remember that specific day in your life?
I remember sort of talking about it with Luke and sort of planning out, well, because obviously Luke works for himself as well, and we were just thinking in
Mm,
terms of lifestyle, it would be so much better if I did as well, and we'd be able to plan, our lives a lot better and schedules. And it was more of a sort of, rather than a one day thing, it was kind of like a gradual, well, how can we do this sort of plan.
mm, mm. So it was built around a strategy to get the lifestyle that you wanted to have together. Was that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mm,
whilst I'm quite unusual in a lot of people decide to go freelance because they hated their job or they hated the people they worked for, and I was
mm.
kind of the opposite. I really enjoyed my job, and I really loved the
That
people.
doesn't surprise me.
I loved the people I worked with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was a hard decision to make. It wasn't, a lot of people are like, oh, I hate it here later. It wasn't like that for me. I really liked the people that I work with. I'm still friends with them. So it
Mm.
was more of a thoughtful process, and I didn't want to be reckless either. I got bills. It turns
Yeah.
it
Sure.
turns out I'm not an eccentric millionaire, sadly. So
You haven't got squillionaire grandparents over there in
no,
Wales.
sadly not. I was hoping I
Mm.
might be secretly related to like some Earl of Wessex or something, but sadly that's not the case.
It's not the
No,
case.
no, I have a great grandmother that ran off with the circus, so that seems apt.
Well, there's a
Oh.
there's a great travel story. At least you got good
Oh,
content in the
exactly,
family.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we just had to be a little bit thoughtful in what we're doing and how to make the best life possible for us, and to kind of make it work, rather than a snap decision one day of, oh, I'm just going to do, travel
Mm,
writing full time.
mm.
So, yeah, we gave it a lot of thought.
I have a lot of my guests who are in similar situations where they've had that transition away from a previous job and hunkered down around travel as being their core operative, if you like. Did you find that transition difficult to manage emotionally and let's say spiritually, in terms of just going from having a workplace where you, as you said, you had all these friends and colleagues, and then actually having all the pressure on yourself to do what you were doing?
I've had kind of a varied work history. I've had periods of self employment before, I've worked abroad as well. So I wasn't really that scared. In fact, the job I had at the college was, a sort of proper adult job. That
Mm,
that was kind of almost out of the ordinary for me. I'd always done kind of, teaching outdoor education abroad. I was a youth worker in Cardiff. I also did freelance events. And when I was working at the college, I was also doing freelance work on top in the evenings and weekends. So I've always been a kind of grafter. I've always had multiple things on the go. I still have multiple things on the go. Travel writing isn't my only outlet. So I wasn't that scared because I'm someone, I mean, I'll just jump in and do anything for some money to get to the next destination. I mean, I have dressed up like Peppa Pig. I once I once led a ghost tour at the last minute because the woman who was leading the ghost tour dropped out. So
I was going to say she disappeared.
She did. She vanished.
Yeah, right. She vanished.
So my friend who runs an event company called me. He was like, hey, can you lead a ghost tour? I was like, when? He was like, today. So
right.
I had to dress up as a witch and go and lead a ghost tour that I just had to completely do on the fly. And I was like, oh, and if you look out into the distance, you will see the haunted sails of Sir Thomas's ship. I don't know if there was a Sir Thomas. I've got no idea. But the kids loved it. So I've always had this kind of, I like to think like go-get-'em attitude. So I wasn't actually that scared to go and to delve into this world because I was like, hey, if it doesn't work out, I'll find something else, you know?
Yeah, great attitude, great attitude. So where did you start? Where did you go to first? And what was your first travel story under this new freelance hat that you were wearing at the time?
My actual first press trip was with Tourism Ireland, who I love. I do a lot of work with them. I'm actually going to Derry for Halloween for them in a couple of weeks. And
that'll be fun.
I'd taken myself to like a travel writer conference, which was really exciting, and I was a bit nervous. You know, this is kind of a new world for me. And this guy came up to me and said, has anyone ever told you look like Khaleesi? And I was like, yes. And here is a photo of me in my Khaleesi outfit. And I showed him on my phone. And he said, give me your card. And the next thing I knew, I was at a Game of Thrones tour in Northern Ireland dressed as Khaleesi.
There you go. Incredible.
So yeah, so I wrote an article about the Game of Thrones filming locations around Ireland, which was a super fun trip. If anyone hasn't done it and you're a fan of the show, I highly recommend it. They give you like swords to play with and they tell you all about the different locations. It is absolutely hilarious. So that was my first kind of trip and I was just hooked. I was like, this is brilliant. I can't believe this is a job.
Yeah, it's so good when you can do something that you're so passionate about and it doesn't feel like work at all.
Oh, definitely.
Now, I'm going to give you a tip about meeting up with your Irish friends in a couple of weeks' time. Please don't talk to them about rugby.
You know, right? Because they are not pleased.
There's a joke, right? There's a New Zealander, an Irishman, and a Welshman go into a bar, and the Welshman and the New Zealanders are the only ones that can stay. The Irishman's got to go home.
Oh, brutal.
Anyway, I got that one, and I wanted to get that one in tonight, so I worked it in there. Tell me, what surprises you every time you travel? What are some of the surprises you get when you travel every time?
For me, it's mostly the kindness that people will show you. I've had numerous incidents of people helping me out on the road when I've got lost or need directions. I've got sick. I once had my card declined because they put a block. My bank sometimes puts a random block on my card, which is always brilliant fun when I'm abroad. Just, you know, they're like, oh, you're abroad, we will block your card. It's like, I'm always abroad. And they blocked my card when I got a taxi. I was in New York and I got a taxi to JFK to fly home. And I went to pay with my card and it got blocked. And I was like, oh my God. So I said to the driver, I was like, stay here, like drop me at the cash point and I'll get some cash out. Again, blocked at the machine. And I can't leave now because I owe like $50 on this cab and my flight, because there'd been traffic as well. Like the gate was closing soon. I was like, I'm going to miss my flight home. I don't know what. So I was in a right state. I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And this woman came up and she was like, what's the problem? And I was like, oh, the machine blocked my card. This is happening. Proper girly. And she paid for my taxi.
Wow.
She paid for my taxi. And I was like, please give me your address. I will send you the money. Like, you know, I obviously wanted to give her the money back. She wouldn't hear any of it. She was like, no, I have a daughter. I understand. Off you go, get your flight. So I did. Oh, wonderful. And that has stayed with me that was about 6 years ago. And that has really stayed with me. So now I try and be, you know, really kind and really nice on the road as well and try and help people out because, it just really reinforces that sense of global community. And that's kind of what
Mm.
I love about travel, the people you meet and how lovely they are, and how a lot of people will go out their way for you. It's the opposite of people constantly telling you, oh, the world's a very scary, dangerous place. And to be honest, I haven't really found that.
Well, it's usually the media, and I was just going to say to you that it's a constant theme on my show that all the people that come on and we talk about this particular thing that you're talking about now is just the generosity of humanity around the world is just never ending. And there's been 50, 60 cases of like-mindedness around things like you've just said, where people have either put up cash or helped people out when they've been in great difficulty. And yet, when you watch, if you ever bother to watch TV news, you think the world's just such a terrible, wicked place to be in. But it's not the case when you travel, is it?
And I think that's why travel is so important, because it exposes you to the fact that there are
Yeah.
lovely people around the world, and there are different cultures, and there is an abundance of kindness out there.
So, from the time that Pip was 18 and taking off to Paris to today, what are some of the things that have changed fundamentally in the way that you travel? Like, it must be a lot easier, as you said before, now with being able to book online and do all those sorts of things. What are some of the other things that have changed quite dramatically over the years for you?
I think it's the use of technology and smartphones as well, not just in travel planning, but I think the negative side of it is, years ago, hostel common rooms used to be a place where everyone would sit and drink like stupidly cheap wine and sit around and chat. And unfortunately, a lot of the time now, people sit around watching Netflix or on their smartphone, or, not really interacting in the same way.
Mm.
And I'm guilty of it as well. So I try and make an effort now, despite the fact that it's my job to kind of limit phone time, because I'm aware it's all too easy to, just sit down and pick up your phone rather than actually interact with your fellow
Mm.
humans. So I think the social aspect has changed a little bit, and that's the downside of the accessibility of technology. And I think that's something that travellers should really be aware of and be thinking about. You've got to think, why am I doing this experience? Is it to see things, to connect with people? And if it's to connect with people, the best way is to put the phone down, really.
It's almost like we need a kind of a conscious traveling guide, which includes all these sorts of things about how can we be more conscious when we travel. And I had a guest on the show and we talked about our impact on the environment when we travel, and how conscious are we of that from the time that we book an air flight to, putting rubbish in the bin when we're in a foreign city, and all those sorts of things. So what you're saying, I think, is really good as well, because it makes us more conscious about our ability to interact and extract the most out of the places that we visit and the people that we meet there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be present
Mm.
when you're traveling and to kind of fully absorb the experience. And that's quite difficult for me now, because a lot of my trips are work trips. So it's my job to go and, write about a destination and to take photos and to take notes. So I have to really kind of build that time in as well to just be.
I was going to ask you about that. So I was going to want to talk to you about your typical, and I'm inverted commas, schedule that you make when you go and do a review on a place that you're visiting. How long do you typically go for?
It depends on if I'm going on a press trip that's organised by the tourism board, or if I'm going off my own back to write about a destination. So, for example, I've just recently been to Florida and Japan on press trips, and those were quite short trips, but they pack a lot in. Like, my days are normally from about 7 a.m. till midnight,
Mm.
and you're sort of shown like lots and lots of different things in the destination. You try different foods, so it's properly full on. But when I travel for myself, I tend to try and go for as long as time and budget will allow. So we went to Sri Lanka for a month in
Mm.
January, which was great because that was a lot slower travel and
Mm.
could spend a lot more time being present, as I said.
Mm.
And this coming January, we're going to Morocco for a month.
Right.
So we're going to work from there as well, and obviously have some time to write about Morocco, but to also experience it for ourselves, which will be lovely.
So I would say that having the opportunity to do both would be quite exciting, because with the go in and do the tourist commission business, that would be quite full of entertainment in terms of you've got a schedule, you're rushed around from place to place. It might be very, very busy, but it must be also very rewarding in terms of the amount of work you can get done in such a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Mm.
I went to Uzbekistan in August and we saw a lot. I was there for about 10 days and there was so much packed in, and the tourism board was so excited to show us the highlights of their amazing country. And it was wonderful to see all the different places and meet locals and try the food. So I do really love press trips. They're a great way of, meeting with the tourism board as well and kind of discussing things that you perhaps wouldn't be able to discuss if you went on your own, like infrastructure and how they try and market the destination, etc., etc.
Okay, time for us to have a bit of a laugh, I think. You write on your website, after many years of travel adventures and unusual mishaps. Can you tell us about some of these unusual mishaps?
Oh my goodness, where do I start? Well, I managed to get cholera in Vietnam years ago.
Really?
That was an interesting experience. Yeah, I ended up in a country hospital, attached to 2 drips that were glass bottles.
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness. And all the locals were peering in through the window. And I remember thinking, this is a town that needs a cinema. Like, my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also broke my wrist on day 1 of our trip in Malta. I fell into the harbour. So that was good, yes.
Right.
Completely sober, I'd like to add.
Okay, tell us how you actually fell into a harbour.
Well, I slipped on all like the seaweed. So it turned out I tried to go down the ramp, not the nice steps that the lovely Maltese people had built for us. No, I had to enter via the slippery ramp, and I slipped, went up in the air and went down on my wrist. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that must have hurt.
And fell into the water, and my poor husband ran in after me, also slipped, fell in, but luckily he didn't break anything. It was just me.
So comedy of errors.
Yeah, that was meant to be like a snorkeling kind of trip, because we both really love snorkeling.
Yeah, but
and of course that had to be abandoned because I broke my wrist. So that turned into a lot more of a foodie and culture trip. So we're planning on going back because I feel really bad. Because I kind of, not ruined. I mean, weirdly enough, the trip wasn't ruined because we just turned it into a different type of trip. And I think for me, that's really important, because travel isn't perfect. Things will happen, and it's how you respond to them. You might miss a flight, get the wrong bus, which I've done on many occasions. You might get sick, you might have an accident. It's entirely what you make of it. I think once you let go of the idea of a perfect holiday, then that's when the real magic can happen, because that's the experience, the good things and the bad things.
What do you dislike the most about travelling?
Airports.
Yep.
Oh, I feel like I live in airports. I travel so much, and I just, because I live in Wales as well, very often flights are from London, so I have to get a very long bus to the airport, I have to wait in the airport, fly, all that kind of stuff. So it's just the waiting around. I try and get work done during this time, or I listen to podcasts, that kind of thing. But it's what I call dead time, really. It's just waiting, and perhaps it's because I'm just a little bit impatient as a person as well, so it doesn't help. But yeah, that's my least favourite bit, is kind of the waiting round.
I'm glad you said airports, because I recently had a gentleman on the show from an airport management team in Seattle, and he was telling me about the challenge they have as an airport to keep us travellers happy, and all the things that they've got in development that in a lot of cases take years and years of infrastructure to build to get them up to speed. And then with the enormous growth of the travel industry, they're always running behind, trying to catch up. So I think it's one thing we don't really have a lot of empathy for, is the struggles that the airport organisations actually have in being able to provide not only up-to-date services, but also getting rid of some of their old infrastructure and turning it over to be more efficient for us travellers to be more happier. So I wanted to play devil's advocate, because I think in terms of the airports get a bit of a bad rap sometimes, but I think there's a lot of countries that are now making a big effort to make sure that infrastructure comes up to speed.
Oh, definitely. And look at airports like Singapore.
Yeah, exactly.
My goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a holiday in itself.
It is, yeah. It's like going to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Okay, so you dislike the most airports. What about aisle or window seat? What kind of traveller are you?
Oh, I've got to have an aisle. Like I have the bladder of a 4-year-old, so I've got to have access to that bathroom. I on my flight over to Japan recently, there was a guy sat next to me, and he didn't use the bathroom in 11 and a half hours. Not that I was watching, that sounds creepy.
It did to
But he
me. Yeah,
didn't.
yeah,
I was like, what is this man's secret? What
yeah.
is he like a camel? Like, what? I've been like 47 times. I don't understand.
I was going to say, he wasn't an Australian from the outback, was he?
No, oh well, like, you could understand it then, couldn't you?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. And especially on night flights, because I don't really want to wake people up. I don't sleep on planes, you see,
Mm,
which is a real nightmare
mm.
for me, especially on long haul. I feel like sometimes the only people awake on the flights are me and the crew. I've tried everything to get myself to sleep, and I can't do it. I've got like a really nice neck pillow, I get a blankie, nothing. I'm
Yeah.
like properly awake. Yeah, I don't know what it is with me. I cannot sleep sat up. So that's kind of another not favorite thing about travel of mine is I often sometimes go 24 hours without sleep,
Wow, wow.
which is like awful.
Mm.
I get home and I'm just like delirious.
I imagine so. Yeah. What's your favourite airline? While we're talking about planes and things.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm a big fan of Emirates.
Yep.
I did a round the world flight with
Mm.
Emirates. When you can go to places like STA Travel and you can get your round the world ticket.
Yep.
And Emirates were doing an offer, so I got to fly Emirates. And whilst it was economy, it was still lovely. Like really nice food facilities. The staff were great.
Mm.
So I'm a big fan of that. Virgin Atlantic, I like as
Yep.
well. And with Europe flights, I love KLM because they fly from my hometown, and
Yep.
they're really good as well. So big up to KLM. I like them.
So, are you a loyal customer? Will you stick with these brands, long term?
Oh, the thing is, I'm like a lot of travellers. I'm going to go where the deals are.
Mm.
Um, so we're always anyone who kind of travels as a lifestyle is big on like searching for like the best flight deal. Excuse me, searching for the best flight deals, all that kind of thing.
Mm.
Signing up to there's kind of like newsletters which tell you about all the secret deals, all that kind of stuff. I
Mm.
book deals on Black Friday, things like that. So whilst I do have my favourite airlines, I'm always on the lookout for a bargain.
Mm. And these are all the things that your writing is about as well to give people advice on how to go about these things the best possible way to get the best deals?
Yeah, I try to focus on that as well. So a
Mm.
big part of my site is what's called affordable luxury. So I'm not writing about super budget travel. Don't get me wrong, that's how I lived my entire 20s,
Mm.
backpacking, $6 a day hostels, living off noodles. But now I'm a little bit older as well. I've got a husband. For me now, it's more about traveling in a slightly nicer way, but without breaking the bank.
Mm.
And there are plenty of other travel writers who are writing about that super budget travel who are absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
But my audience as well is a little bit older.
Mm.
So I'm kind of writing again, like I said before, I'm writing with me in mind. So it's the kind of thing I tend to write about is for people who are a little bit older. They've got a little bit more money than when they're in their 20s, and they're looking to have nice experiences without spending a fortune.
Yeah. So
So that's kind of the
that.
angle.
I'm interested in that particular what you just spoke about in terms of your audience. Was that always the case from the beginning when you started? Was it the audience demographic the same as it is today, or has that changed in any way?
Yeah, I've noticed it's changed to like be a little bit of a slightly older age bracket.
Mm.
I've got mostly women readers as well, and that makes sense because women tend to do a lot more of the travel planning, right?
Yeah.
Certainly
Yep.
the case within my circle of friends. And yeah, I just get really nice sort of feedback from readers as well. I get nice messages, emails, tweets, just saying, "Oh, I followed your
Mm.
Rome itinerary, or I followed your Game of Thrones itinerary. I really enjoyed it," and that's always
Mm.
just so lovely to hear. I love getting that
Mm.
kind of feedback and knowing that in a very small way I've kind of made a difference.
It is good, isn't it? And I can relate to that because I've got people doing the same with the podcast. And I've always said that the reason I started this was if we can change one person's life through travel, then we've changed a lot. So getting that feedback to hear somebody say, "Hey, I listened to that particular show and I really love what that person said, and I'm going to go and book a trip to that place."
Oh,
It's a really
that's
good
nice.
feeling, isn't it?
Definitely. And what
Mm.
I like doing is inspiring, like I said previously, about getting people to those more offbeat destinations as well, rather than just Paris, Venice, London,
Mm. Mm.
etc. Don't get me wrong, love all those cities, but I love sort of like making people think about, well, maybe I could do, say, Utrecht instead of Amsterdam,
Yeah, exactly.
or Little Rock in Arkansas instead of Chicago, that kind of thing, like making people realize that there are other places with interesting things to offer as well. And I love it when I get feedback from readers saying, actually, I went to, the kind of offbeat, kooky places you recommended and I loved it.
How how intense and competitive is the travel blogging landscape? Is it something that you feel as though there's massive competition out there, or are you just in your own niche and you're doing your own thing and don't really worry about it?
I mean, I just kind of just focus on what I'm doing really, and as long as my readers find value in what I'm doing, that's all that kind of really matters to me. There's, a huge range of travel writers and content creators out there doing amazing things, and I've got several really good friends through doing this job as well, which is absolutely lovely because it's how you view things. I don't view it as, oh, it's competition. It's we're all one community, all working towards the same goal, which is to inspire people to travel.
Right. Mm. That's a great way of looking at it. And therefore, do you become like a mentor to others? Have you had people reaching out to you and asking you for advice?
Yeah, I have. But what I tend to do is, because I write about travel. That's my focus. I don't write about travel writing,
Right.
if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Mm.
So what I tend to do is try and help to the best of my ability, but I always refer them to people who are doing that because they're doing it much because that's their focus and niche, and that's what they're really good at.
Mm.
So I've got several friends who, write about becoming a content creator or about travel writing, and some of them also run courses. So I kind of steer them in that direction because, that they're better off talking to those people about that particular topic.
Yeah, sure. But for someone that wants to start off doing exactly what you're doing, what kind of advice would you give them to get started?
Oh, that is a good question. I would say just like travel as much as you're, financially and time able to, and do it for you. Do it for the love of travel, not just, oh, what can I get out of this? That kind of mentality. Like, start this job if you absolutely love travel and you're obsessed with it and that's what you want to do,
Mm.
and everything else will fall into place.
Mm.
And
Just
try a range of travel as well. Because I've done so many different styles of travel over the years, I feel really comfortable answering questions now. So, I've worked abroad, lived abroad, studied abroad, interrailed, hitchhiked, backpacked solo across Canada, worked in the Australian outback. I've tried so many different things, and I've done so many different types of travel that I think it's made me the person I am today, the writer I am today, and I feel comfortable answering a range of topics. So get out of your comfort zone, like try lots and lots of different travel styles and see what works for you.
what are your two favourite travel styles or the things that you've just mentioned there?
I I really loved slow travel or working in another country. I loved my time in Australia because traveling somewhere and living somewhere, you gain a completely different perspective.
Mm.
So I travelled first to Australia, came back, and then I went to go and work in Australia. And when I worked in Australia, I taught outdoor education, and Monday to Friday, I lived in a hammock in the outback.
Ah,
So,
there we go.
yeah, and I met obviously my co-workers were locals, so I met like lots of Australians, and you just get a totally different perspective from
Mm.
when you're living and working somewhere than to when you travel somewhere. So I love doing that as well, and sort of getting an insight into a country and its culture.
Well, that experience that you've just mentioned there is a lot different than being down by the Sydney Opera House on the harbour front.
Oh, absolutely. And the other style of travel I love is just solo travel, winging it, which is what I did in Canada a few years ago. I just went to Vancouver, met with a friend there for a few days, and didn't really have a plan beyond that, to be honest. So I love that kind of suck it and see kind of travel.
Isn't it great how you can go to a country and yet have different types of travel experiences while you're in that country? You could actually merge a number of those different styles together, as you've just mentioned, and come out with a completely different travel experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
I used to do the summer camps in America, so I'd spend a good few months living and working in one place in the States, and then using the money that I'd saved up from working, I'd then travel
Mm.
around the States. So you're right, it's great to combine two different types of travel, and if you can work in a country, you can then get that real insight and experience, and then hopefully use the money to fund further travels in that country.
What are a couple of your favourite places in the United States?
Ooh, I went to Michigan in
Mm.
May,
Hmm.
and again, I love going to those kind of quirky, offbeat places. And I loved. We travelled around the Michigan lakes and ended
Oh,
up in all these
beautiful.
cute little towns like Sagatuck, and they look like the set of the Gilmore Girls. I
Hmm.
kid you not. Oh, they're amazing. So, again, people wouldn't perhaps really think about Michigan, but
No,
the
absolutely, yeah.
scenery is beautiful, like round by the lakes, and there's wineries. So, if you go up to Traverse City, there's loads of boutique wineries, and you can do wine tours,
Mm.
which I highly recommend. They're really, really good fun.
Yeah,
So I really I love that. I went to Clearwater
right.
recently. So when most people go to Florida, they go
Mm.
to Orlando, right?
Mm. Yep,
Whereas Clearwater has
yep.
got, I believe, the number one beach as ranked by TripAdvisor in the States.
Right.
And the sand is like white powder. It is stunning.
Now, am I
Absolutely
right
beautiful.
in saying that it's over by Tampa?
Yes, so you
Yeah,
can
right.
fly, if you're UK based, you can fly direct now from London to Tampa. So that's really cool.
Mm.
And again, they've got things like dolphin tours.
Yeah.
Had no idea. So you can go on a boat, and they're really good because they won't sort of like disturb the dolphins per se. Like the company we went with is really ethical, and they'll drive around, and very often the dolphins will like jump around in the wake of the boat.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. That
Oh,
sounds really cool.
it was amazing. So, yeah, there's just so much on offer in the States, is what I find. It's beyond just New York, Chicago, LA. There's so many cool, interesting places there. But I think people just get a bit nervous about going outside of the box, and
Mm.
hopefully that's where I try and step in and go, well, hey, you can go to Clearwater, you can go to Little Rock, you can go to Michigan. There's really cool places, and this is how you could do it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've been saying for years that the United States is underestimated when it comes to travel destination because there's just so many different experiences you can have in one country, it's for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Now, you're darting all over the world, so I'd really like to know, and I'm sure my listeners would too, what are the three things in your suitcase that you never travel without?
Um, this is funny. I've tried to become a lot more organised in my packing because Luke's always like, "Why have you brought a Harry Potter wand and no pants? What is wrong with you?" So I'm definitely like, mate,
And this is your husband asking
I
you this
know, I
question, yeah.
know. I'm a bit of a last minute sort of panic packer. Like
Mm.
my bus will be at like lunchtime, and it'll be like 8 a.m. and I'll be like, oh, I should really think about packing. um, I always travel with like a lot of my tech, so laptop, GoPro, camera. I've always got my notebook as well to
Mm.
make notes.
Hmm.
And
It's
I
funny
never
you said the tech stuff.
Yeah, because I love writing on the road as well. Like I said, whether it's in an airport or sometimes I'll sit in like a really cool cafe in abroad. So I like to, take my notes and type them up on my laptop. I also never
Mm.
travel anywhere without my Kindle because I'm an absolute avid reader. I
Right.
read a crazy amount, and so I cannot be away from my Kindle. In fact, I carry it around everywhere with me, even when I'm home. So if I've got a spare 5 minutes, I'll be reading.
Are you reading or are you listening to audiobooks?
I read and I listen to podcasts rather than audiobooks. So
Very good choice, I would say.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
good choice.
Maybe I'll get onto the whole audiobooks thing, but I like to. I like to kind of read at my own pace because I'm quite a fast reader as
Mm.
well. So I think I think audiobooks might be too slow for me.
Too slow, too slow. Yeah.
I know. So and I mean,
There's a
if
I
I
was
could
going to
get
say
someone
there's a
really
business
cool,
opportunity for you. You could
hmm,
start a new audiobook there where someone's speaking very, very fast.
that's true. And because I'm Welsh, we tend to speak quite fast as well, so that could be quite entertaining.
Hmm. What's your favourite snack food when you're travelling?
Ooh, I mean, I want to say fruit to be good, but in reality, I do love chocolate.
Mm.
I'm a big chocolate fan, but unfortunately, I'm a big Cadbury's chocolate fan. So very often abroad, you
Oh,
can't get Cadbury's, which makes me
yeah.
very sad. So I try and have whatever the local snack is. So if I'm in the Netherlands, I'll have like bitterballen and that kind of stuff. So I'll always try and find out what the local snacks are, and obviously try them for my own, experience, and to write about it as well, and to say to readers, hey, you could try this kind of crazy food.
Yeah. I've got a whiteboard going in my studio here, and I'm writing down what all my guests say is their favourite snack food, and I can tell you that chocolate is a long way out in front at
Oh
the
yeah,
moment.
love me some chocolate. I've always got like a family size bar of dairy milk on the go.
Tell me, has all the travel that you've done over the years, has it changed you in any way as a person?
I like to think so. I think it makes you more open as a person, hopefully less judgmental. But I think for me, it's just made me really flexible.
Hmm.
So, I try not to stress too much about things because, like I said previously, travel can go wrong. You can miss buses or, get sick. All these kind of things could happen. You could try and check into the wrong hotel. I've done that. You can get ripped off by taxi drivers, and I think if those experiences make you really stressed, angry, and anxious all the time, like
Yeah.
that's not going to be a very enjoyable life experience. So I try and just kind of chalk up a lot of things to, well, that's travel. So I think it's just made me a bit
Hmm.
more patient and flexible as a person, and able to kind of adapt to ever changing situations. Because
Hmm. Are you somebody that meditates and go and sits by the water and thinks about the deeper meaning of life when you travel?
I think I'm definitely more sit in a coffee shop with a coffee the size of my face kind of person and have a little think. I'm too fidgety to meditate. After 30 seconds, I'm like, no, I'm done. But I am a sit in a coffee shop in other countries and kind of people watch and chill out and kind of think
Yeah.
about things. Like I said, maybe make some notes or type some stuff up. So I do really enjoy doing that.
Have people changed over the years? That's a weird question to ask you, but when you travel now compared to when you're 18 and that, have you seen a difference in the way people are around the world?
Yeah, as I discussed, I think a little bit less connected, which is a shame. A little bit more,
Yeah.
on phones and a bit more screen time and stuff. So that's one thing I've majorly noticed. And the photo taking, of course, because
Hmm.
everyone's got a camera on their
Yeah.
smartphone. So previously, you go
Yeah.
to a landmark and someone might have a disposable camera. Now everyone's got a smartphone.
Yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
big
Right.
change I've noticed. And I don't mean to sound critical because hey, I take photos, it's my job, but it's just as an observer, it's just really interesting to know if you go to somewhere like the
Mm.
Eiffel Tower now, the pyramid, first what's the first thing you do? You whip your phone out. You gotta get those photos.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, tell me, where would you like to see your travel site in 5 years from now?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I'm in the process of launching a travel podcast as well because I'm looking for new ways to connect with my readers. And I thought, because I'm a big fan of travel podcasts like yours and others, I thought,
Mm.
that might be quite a nice way to kind of connect with people. I don't tend to put a
Yeah.
lot of, say, very personal things online. Just it's just not in my nature, really. I just like talking about travel and that kind of thing. I know some people are the opposite of that, and that's fine, and that's them. But it's not massively in my nature to do that. And I thought a good way to connect with readers would be to do something like a podcast as well. To kind of.
So when's your first episode coming out?
Should be November.
Oh, lovely.
I know we've recorded it because we've got a studio in our house, you see, because my husband's a music producer, and we also own a music production library together called Clearwave. So we've already got a studio in our house, so I think that would be a natural sort of step for me. I'd also love to do maybe like an ebook or something about how to live a life of travel and all the different opportunities you could embrace, like working abroad, volunteering, that kind of thing. So I've got kind of loose goals. I just need to kind of more formalize them in my head. The podcast is the next step for me, and then beyond that, maybe I'll look at doing like an ebook or something. I think that'd be quite a nice resource for people to have.
My last question for you today: if you weren't doing what you were doing as a travel blogger, what would you be doing?
Oh, that's a good question. Chocolate tasting.
Sorry, that job's taken. I've got that.
Damn, I think I'd two things. I'd either go back to teaching outdoor ed because I love it. I've done that in the UK, in America and Australia, and it is a job that I absolutely love. It's really good fun. But actually, more and more, after going on press trips, I'm like, I'd quite like to work for, say, a tourism board or a PR company that promotes tourism. I think it's a really interesting job.
It is, yeah. That sounds great.
And, you'd still get to go away, which is good. And you'd see the other side of it, which I think would be really interesting.
You never know what might happen when you put those thoughts out to the universe. They usually end up coming true, don't they?
Yes.
But I was very surprised that you didn't say to me that your next career opportunity was going to be the rugby union coach of the Welsh team.
Oh, I know. I think me and Warren should do a co-coaching. I think we'd be very good at that.
As long as Luke's going to bring coffee, I think it wouldn't be a problem.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, he could definitely be. He makes a very nice coffee, so he'd be good at that.
Well, I hope that we get to join forces in the final of the Rugby World Cup. Wales against New Zealand would be a very good final for a lot of different reasons.
That's the dream. Can you imagine?
Let's hope that we both get there. Pip, it's been wonderful having you on my show today. Thank you very much for sharing very quickly. The hour's gone so fast. We could have talked for hours, I'm sure, about all your intrepid travel adventures and everything, and I've really enjoyed having you on. So I'd love to have you back sometime, maybe after you've done one of your next trips, and you can tell us all about it.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, and have a nice day over there in Wales.
Definitely. Thanks.
Thanks, Pip. There we go. That was the lovely Pip Jones talking to us all the way from beautiful Wales. Now, Pip was the first in a series of episodes we're doing with different travel bloggers around the world, so I hope you enjoyed getting a great insight on what it's like to be a travel blogger and some of the challenges, but also many of the highs associated with having that kind of lifestyle. Okay, if you're looking for other podcasts in our episodes, go to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. There you'll find a whole list of all of the podcasts that we've done thus far. If you want to download them, simply go to Apple iTunes, search under the podcast section for the Global Travel Channel, and you can download all the episodes from there. You can also find us on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and a host of other platforms which are all listed on our website. Okay, that's it from me in this particular episode. If you like our content, why not share it with your family or friends or even work colleagues? The more people we can get listening to the Global Travel Channel podcast show, the better. So until next time, my name is Mark Philpott. I wish you all bon voyage.